Okay, hopefully we are actually on track to have a decent Ask Me Anything live stream event here. And we'll see if my technical failings when I accidentally launched the earlier stream key. I've tried to delete that out, but it's always annoying when you have 5 minutes of technical challenge out there. And hopefully I can avoid doing that too much in the future. But it's always the joys and wonder when you're alone at the studio trying to pull this off yourself. And I am still learning kind of a new system here. So I apologize for anybody that got a fake sense that I was doing apparently an interview with Brian Haywood, which I was not doing. Instead, it was just me trying to sort out my issues on the my live stream key problems here. But anyway, we're back with you. Thank you guys so much for logging in. Hopefully, we will get to quite a few of your questions here. Just in case it's not clear, and I think I've put it right up here, don't forget to do at We the Governed when you do actually ask a question. It'll just be a little bit easier for me to see the question in the midst of just a number of other questions and commentary that tends to pop up when we're doing these live streams. And I will try to avoid too many technical challenges as I'm moving ahead. So hopefully this will be an effective and useful live stream for those of you who are paying attention. Now, obviously, I normally try to do these on Tuesdays. I was not able to do that today. Because I have a DOGE Washington training class up in Burien that looks like it's going to be pretty well attended, actually, at the Hope Church. And the training actually starts at 7, but you're going to want to get there about 6:30 to get registered and signed in. That one is sponsored by the King County GOP with a number of local ledge districts, I think, involved in that. And they tell me there's quite a few people already that they expect to be there, but we'll see. So if you happen to be in Burien at 7 o'clock, 6:30, I guess, tomorrow, that's where I'll be doing this training. And hopefully for those of you who want to dig a little bit more into the corruption and other challenges that we have here in Washington State, hopefully that'll be the time and the place that that you can get a little bit more training in and hopefully get inspired to get out there and actually engage and look for fraud where you live, because unfortunately it's probably everywhere, but it's fairly useful if you kind of get a basic sense of some of the ways to make it a little bit easier for you to find fraud wherever you look. Let me see if I've got my list up here correctly. I think I've got a couple of basic things here. One of the things I like to try to do when I start these live streams, as people are kind of getting their questions organized and getting them sorted out, is just to give you a quick update on places that I'll be. If I did see you just recently at the Gig Harbor training, DOGE training that we had, it was on Saturday. Probably it was inconveniently scheduled in a way because the Seahawks game started a couple hours after it ended, so a lot of people were kind of getting ready for the pregame warm up there. But for those of you who did come, and there were quite a few of you, that was a little bit more of an advanced, more thorough sort of training class with a lot more focus on some of the deeper levels of investigation to dig into some of the fraud that's more related to probably some of the organized crime manipulations inside of state government or local government. And I do appreciate many of the people, especially former law enforcement or retired law enforcement that were there. It was always helpful to have people with good investigative backgrounds providing some of your insight, and many of the questions that were asked there as well. It was a great class. So anyway, so that was good, and I'm very optimistic. I had a number of people from that class, really just hours later, who were contacting me with some of the things that they were finding as they looked into challenges and problems and questionable expenditures in Pierce County. So my guess is we'll be going public with some of that very shortly, and I think it's very helpful to, just to get inspired and start looking. I mean, one of the challenges is you don't find it if you don't look. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be super easy always to find what you're looking for. But if you kind of have an open mind when you dig into it, don't let your bias confirmation get in the way of the truth. And as you dig in, you will inevitably find stuff. So as a quick reminder then, tomorrow I will be out there at the and let's see, tomorrow's the 20th. So doing a DOGE training class for King County GOP, or sponsored by the King County GOP originally. And we'd set this on the schedule, by the way, quite a bit before the Nick Shirley video. So it's just interesting to see the changing interests of people who want to dig into finding fraud in Washington State, which isn't terribly difficult. But just the different volume of people now that are more interested in actually digging into it. And so we'll see you there at 7 o'clock. But try to get there at 6:30 if you want to get registered, because I'm going to start right on time at 7, mainly because that's a little bit later start than we normally do these training sessions. And I usually stay around later to answer anybody's questions or talk to people, but there might be a lot of people there, and it just might be a good thing for you to get there early if you can. Right after that, I will be in Spokane on Thursday, January 22nd, and I know I'm speaking at the Citizens Alliance for Property Rights Spokane chapter event that evening, around 5:30 p.m., give or take. It might start officially at 6, but I will be there, and it'll be fun to see a lot of people out in Spokane. I was just out there last week. So, and I anticipate being right back out there again pretty soon, especially for those of you who are trying to organize a DOGE training class out there, and looking at some of the parallels between the homeless industrial complex in Spokane and also the homeless industrial complex in the Puget Sound area. And then right away after that, the next day, I will be at the Roanoke Conference out on Ocean Shores, and hopefully many of you are going to be out there as well. That goes from Friday to Sunday, the 23rd to the 25th. It is the largest gathering of center-right Republicans, kind of political insiders, conservative activists that the state has to offer consistently for many years now. And I believe the first year that they had it would have been 2010 or something like that. 2009, I guess, is when they established the conference. So it's been going on for quite a while. If you haven't been to one of these, I think you'd find it quite worthwhile to go. It's really an opportunity beyond the programming and the panel discussions and all that. I think sometimes the greatest value you really get there is the opportunity, number one, to meet a bunch of legislators who are currently in the legislative session, taking the weekend off, driving an hour and a half away out to Ocean Shores, and being in a more casual environment, the opportunity to chat with them on the side, and a lot of other elected officials that'll also be there, plus a bunch of Republican activists from all around the state. So the networking opportunities you're going to find there just by meeting the other people who are attending the conference is quite high. I have been on the board on this conference for quite a few years now. I'm getting a little long in the tooth to be on that board, so I think we'll probably be handing my position off to a younger person before too long, but I will still be involved in the conference moving forward because I'm a big fan of it. And I really do say that the opportunity to get together and network with other people from around the state all in one place at one time is actually quite helpful and valuable. So if you are going to be there, please take advantage of that opportunity to meet other people that are also there, get to know them, sit with different people at the various dinners and lunch functions and other programs, and the opportunity at the after parties just to meet a lot of people and get to know them a little bit better. And I believe that the other one that I had on my schedule here, I will be speaking at the Women of Washington event out in Medina on February 18th. That's a Wednesday. That is a paid event, and it's a little on the steep side, but I think it's $100 actually, or $150 to go to that event. But I am going to be the speaker there. And it's probably not a surprise that some of the topics that I will be talking about will be involved in some of what's being uncovered right now in Washington State, both the stories that you've heard and the ones you haven't heard yet. So there is a lot going on right now, and I'm sure that some of your questions are going to be about the legislative session, and so we will have a bit to talk about there. And I'm just going to do a quick double check on a few things here just to make sure I haven't totally screwed this up. I think I really had created some problems for some of you by launching the live stream that I did accidental feed earlier, and I should always remember to have the mic muted when I'm trying to sort out my technical problems here. But with that, let's jump into some of the questions, and I see that there are a number of them here, and let's get to those, and let's see if the people that I scared away with my fake launch of a live stream earlier, if they jump back on here. First question that we really have here is, and this is an actual question, is, let's see, this is from Puppy Bite for Trump. We the Governed, and by the way, if you want that to pop up so it's easier for me to see, you just have to use the @We the Governed sign, so kind of like this right here. Why can't we stop the taxation? Question mark. Lastly, will we get federal voting laws in place? Well, two different questions. We can stop the taxation, but it does require us to put a lot of pressure and attention on our political class right now. We do not have technically the votes to stop it, but I think a certain amount of exposure of the corruption of some of the people pushing these schemes and plans and dreams and all the different ideas that they have. They want to squander and waste your taxpayer dollars on whatever their fraud is that they want to cover up. I think it's worth exposing as much of that as possible right now, right in the middle of the legislative session, and not pretending like it's not happening and confronting them directly about it. It's the only way I can see of to necessarily derail some of them. There's also the one thing to keep in mind when you say can't stop the taxation. We regularly do stop dumb bills in Olympia, even when we don't have the votes. Sometimes it's just a matter of exposing just the silly and goofy nature of the crazy people that are in charge. Sometimes it's just a matter of digging into other issues. There's sometimes drama that pulls up. This is a short session, 60 days, not 90. Usually that puts them up against the clock right from the beginning. There's a lot of crazy bills that get thrown into the hopper that don't go anywhere. You'll see and hear about a bunch of them. I don't believe in just doing clickbait stories about dumb, bad bills, because if you did that, you could run hundreds of those videos every single month and mock them endlessly for the stupidity. They certainly are worth being called out on it, but I don't think that it's worth being too stressed about it until you see them advance far enough down the process that it looks like they may have a chance. I still think it's totally worth signing up and being opposed to it. Many people have seen some of the chains of emails going around about how to sign up and sign in opposition to the bill. And I will have to probably do another updated video. I did one on this a little while ago that people use sometimes to go in and sign on bills, but I need to review it just to make sure that they've been doing some mostly good updates on the legislative side of things for the interface that you can actually log in and sign in con or in favor of, and just showing you ways of on how to do that a little bit easier if you are so inclined, and hopefully some of you are. It's something. It's like easy button politics. You can log in from home and essentially sign in opposition or support of various initiatives. And it's a lot easier than it was, say, 10 years ago, where you essentially had to drive down to Olympia and do that in person, which I did many times since I live not far away. So anyway, I hope that's we can stop it. Exposing it is worth exposing, but also paying attention to the people who push these dumb, bad bills and the taxes, because they are not the people you want in public office in the future. And we do need to replace quite a few of some of the more incompetent and corrupt politicians that we have in Olympia today. And let's get to, the second part of that question. Will we get federal voting laws in place? I actually think what you mean is there's a federal lawsuit that's going on against Washington State right now. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division is suing Secretary of State Hobbs, essentially looking at cleaning up the Washington State voter rolls. And that is a big deal. I think that is an underappreciated aspect of the process right now. What's putting a lot of pressure on the more corrupt elements of our political class, because the last thing they want to do is clean up the voter rolls. The last thing they want to do is have transparent elections. In fact, the last thing they want to do is have really anything with elections that potentially would expose the truth about some of the screwed up nature of elements of that election process. So that lawsuit's actually quite a threat to the political insiders. There's really three different cases that are going on. Three different elements of what the feds are doing when they look at Washington State. And mainly, I think the voter roll issue is one of them. The Act Blue investigation that's going on is another one, because that's going to affect potentially the money laundering, kind of smurfing, fake contribution problems that I think the Democrats have, with about 60% of their funding comes through Act Blue. And as that entity's been investigated much more closely for the first time, should have been done many years ago, should have been done a decade ago, but nevertheless, they're starting to do it now. And looking at it is actually potentially going to have ramifications for at least money laundering or basic smurfing operations that they're using, and possibly outside foreign influence in the campaign finance contribution process. The third thing, of course, is going to be digging into the fraud, just the general fraud. I don't think people realize how much of a panic some of the political insiders are about that fraud being exposed. as much as it's easy to mock Governor Walz out of Minnesota, essentially he is existing as the example of somebody that they don't want to see. Like Bob Ferguson doesn't want to be the next Tim Walz. Newsom may be on that kind of chopping block. Pritzker out of, a number of these different governors. They don't necessarily want to be that guy. So they're probably sitting back happy that Minnesota's getting the big attention right now. But it's not just Minnesota. It's happening all over the place. Washington State, certainly, for sure, as well. I do believe the couple things that are going to impact Washington State voter roll or Washington State voting in 2026. The litigation over just seeing the voter rolls will be a fairly big deal. I realize there was a Supreme Court decision, or I should say a federal judge in California decided that the feds shouldn't be allowed to see it, but that doesn't seem like that's going to stand very long. Most likely that's going to be overturned. That goes up the food chain to the appellate level. I would guess that it goes straight to it may be heard by the Ninth Circuit before it goes to the Supreme Court. But one of these cases, there's 24 different lawsuits, I think 25 now out there about voter rolls. I know Virginia was just recently sued on this. So at some point in time, these decisions start to get decided at the federal level where they can't be appealed anymore, and forcing Washington State Democrats, just like the Democrats in the Reconstruction South that attempted to conceal their voter rolls as well. They'll eventually have to reveal exactly how many non-U.S. citizens they've registered to vote and all kinds of other problems. It's not a utopian solution to the election process, but it's an impact. The other case is the Mississippi case. It's before the Supreme Court right now. I don't remember the name of it, but it's one that has to do with voting and has more to do with counting votes after the election. Again, that doesn't actually impact directly the voter roll, or I should say mail-in voting, which is usually what people in Washington State, what we're mainly focused at. But it does make a big difference if they make that decision. It's been scheduled to be decided with plenty of time to be basically implemented across the country. It would change the way our voting is done in Washington State. We would have to stop letting it couldn't be a 2-month voting process anymore, or 2.5-month voting process. They would actually have to have all the ballots in by election night, and that would change things quite a bit for Washington State. Next question. I'm curious, what is the intro outro theme song for We the Government videos? Actually, I licensed this through MusicBed, and the name of the song is out right now, and I don't remember the name of the group. So, but it was a song I liked, and so I thought it fit well with the show. And I've had a lot of people comment about it, mostly positively, not too much negatively, although there's some people that said I am playing it way too loud at the bumper end of my regular recorded videos. So if so, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to do that too much. I do my own editing on those right now, and I do try to drop that level down so it's a little bit less sudden when it comes at the end, and it doesn't wake you up so much. Let's see. I'm looking for questions here, so I know there's other commentary in the middle, but here's a question from Gladys20121. Are your expectations high or low that the Trump administration will be able to help us here in Washington in meaningful ways? Elections, fraud, natural gas ban, etc. That's a good question. I don't know about the natural gas ban issue, but the short answer is yes. But the more nuanced answer on this is that, listen, to you and I, perhaps, to me, certainly, Washington State's center of the universe. That's where we live. It's where my family lives, fifth-generation Washingtonian, so I care about Washington. But I also have to recognize I'm 3,000 miles away from Washington, D.C. Now, that's a better place to be when you have a Democrat administration in D.C., but when you're hoping for the very rare moments in human history when federal government actually has the ability to do something good for you, then you want to be involved sooner. The challenge that we face as Washington is that we're just not the most important state from the federal administration's fights with state issues right now. I mean, we're in the same pool of corrupt governors and corrupt Democrat administrations with massive fraud and voter problems and all the other issues that some of these other states have. But if you really look at where the priority, I think, of the Department of Justice has been lately, at least since over the last year, it is California, it's Illinois, it's New York, it's Massachusetts a little bit. And to some extent, I actually think Virginia, because it's so close, I think that's going to get a little bit more attention than we do. Minnesota simply put itself into that mix for two reasons. Number one, I think it's a swing state with a lot of corruption, so there is a political overtone to addressing some of this issue there. But also the corruption is so egregious, so over the top. The politicians are so stupid and incompetent and blatantly, obviously problematic that it was just they couldn't resist it. Plus, you had the governor there as a former vice presidential candidate, which also puts a little bit more attention on that state. And so I do think that that's what put Minnesota there. Washington is probably in that tier 2. We're probably in the next level state. We're like Oregon or maybe Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maine, places like that clearly are in the bad category, but they're going to disappear, and we will be in that impact zone. But likely some of the federal court decisions are probably coming out of these other states first and getting decided, and how they get implemented in Washington, we'll have to see. If you're in Bob Ferguson's shoes right now as our governor, his objective is to posture and pretend like it's the big Trump versus Ferguson fight. But, Ferguson's kind of a pipsqueak compared to these other big states. And so what Ferguson really wants to do from a practical standpoint is just make sure that he gets to posture and virtue signal and pretend like he's opposing Trump, but not be so obvious and so over the top that, he's the nail that gets the hammer. What he's going to want to do is pretend like he's in that sort of place, but let these other states take the attention. Now, it is, of course, obvious and meaningful, the fact that he brought out Minnesota Governor Walz to do his fundraising for him. And as the Somali fraud investigations continue, it'll become more and more obvious that there's a clear tie between Minnesota and Washington, at least on that batch of fraud. But there's so much fraud going on in so many different places that as you get into expose it all, you're going to see that, I don't know, it could be that a story gets so big in Washington that it puts us on the map in a little different way than what we might have been otherwise. The other thing is it depends on how much of this other DSHS fraud, the SNAP benefit fraud, the Medicare, Medicaid fraud, the HUD fraud, the SBA fraud, all the other fraud that basically is the primary vehicle by which apparently a lot of the political establishment gets their political power from by distributing cash to be stolen by special interests, then some of it fed back into their bank accounts or campaign coffers, then it does appear that maybe some story could be big enough that it could put us in the front page because it's gone so far over the top, just like Minnesota. But likely, I think we're really second-tier states, and I do think that it could have a big impact on us. I think that what would really help Washington is have most of the federal funding cut off here, since a good chunk of it's being stolen anyway, and it's probably being laundered back into political campaigns. Cutting that off would probably be a benefit to the state of Washington, at least to those of us who aren't corrupt and part of the fraud operation. So I think that would be helpful. And I do think the election lawsuit is a big deal. I think that the Act Blue lawsuit is also a pretty big deal. Both of those would have direct impacts on the political process moving forward. I don't think the redistricting drama, that has come up. There was a bad bill, of course, proposed where the Democrats in our state, who have already gerrymandered the state pretty aggressively, think that they can maybe squeeze a little bit more juice from the lemon and get maybe try to redistrict in some way. I don't know if that's going to go anywhere. They kind of didn't achieve what they thought they were when they did this redistricting game in the state legislature to get I think it was the 14th legislative district in eastern Washington as a Democrat. They failed in that effort, but it had a big impact on Republicans. It really distracted a lot of Republican races across, I believe it was 12 different districts that were impacted by that. Only one of those, I think, was a Democrat district, maybe two of them, but the rest of them were Republican districts that were affected by it. And that was some drama. If you can conceive of corruption, it's here in Washington, right? The judges, the insiders, homeless industrial complex, the bureaucracy, the political leadership. We know there's a lot of corruption here. What your job and my job, I think, is just to expose more of it, and I think there's a lot more to expose. Let's jump into the next one. Dilly Dahlia, you have a question here. Have you heard about let's see. Have you heard about the landlord lawsuit against the governor's office and several Washington cities for the COVID eviction moratorium? I hope they prevail, but am not hopeful. I've heard about it. I actually don't know where that lawsuit is in its process. I remember when it was filed, and I remember having conversations about when it was filed. But I don't know where it's at actually in the process right now. I'm assuming that's a state lawsuit. And, the one challenge we have is there's no honest judges on the Washington State Supreme Court. Or at the appellate court level. They're pretty much all totally comprehensively corrupt to the core. I doubt any of them really have any attachment or concern about the state constitution or the meaning of law or English language or anything. They essentially function as just a political extension of the governor's office at this point in time and the Democrat Party and whatever their special interests are. They've done a good job of purging that level of the court system almost entirely of any judges that care about the truth or are remotely unattached from political kind of encumbrance in how they rule. And so if this lawsuit's considered politically important for the internal folk, I would imagine that the judges are feeling pretty safe about being corrupt in our state. So unless it's a lawsuit at the federal level, I don't, and even there, our local federal judges aren't great, but at least you get a chance to go up to real judges at some point in time when you leave the state. So we'll see. Again, every now and then I could be surprised. Sometimes a court case slips through the system and, it becomes an opportunity for the judges to pretend like they care. And that's always great when that actually happens. Jim McPhee, 01S. At We the Govern, good job. The only reason why I didn't pull up there is you just put a comma in, and that just makes it so you don't see it as easily there. I had asked you last week about SB 5926, the one by Lisa Wellman. And it's supposed to block access to state-funded child care information. Do you think it will pass? And the answer to that is no. In fact, Lisa Wellman's abandoned it at this point in time. She was the only sponsor on that bill. I think that one's dead. Frankly, she's probably too senile and unfamiliar with what she was signing to even be aware that that's what she signed. She actually didn't know that she had signed that bill. Hopefully it really was her signature and it wasn't like an election ballot where anybody can sign it and they accept it. So I'm curious about that a little bit. But when confronted about it, she seriously backpedaled and said that there was no interest in moving it forward. It sounded like that thing is dead at this point in time. Mainly because of the national mockery that the Democrats got for proposing that bill. Now, keep in mind, the funny thing about that bill, that when it came out like a week before Nick Shirley's video, which is really the one that kind of drove the interest on the Somali fraud. But she was really, I think it had been probably if she signed it, it was probably passed to her by like one of the lobbyists who was getting worried that after some of the earlier stories about the fraud were coming out, that they kind of, I think it was Chris Rufo's story that had come out about a month before. That was kind of what was starting to inspire the panic inside the establishment as they were trying to figure out how they can cover up the fraud. And so unfortunately, this is just so you know, I mean, legislators don't write their own bills, okay? Just for total clarity's sake. There are exceptions to that, but they are rare and few and not many out there. So typically what happens is either a lobbying group or some other entity comes forward and they pitch the bill ideas. They walk bill ideas around. Listen, I've done this myself as a grassroots activist before. You walk them around the Capitol and you get a couple of people who are interested in that issue and they sign off on it. And once they sign off on it, then it goes into the nonpartisan staff for them to officially make sure it fits with their naming conventions and language structure and all that. And then it comes back out as the bill, and at least the first version of it. And the legislators really oftentimes aren't terribly involved in that process. And so it is possible, especially on the Democrat side, where they'll have bills that they've just never read. They don't even realize they signed on to them, and yet they probably did. Or they're too, they just simply are doing what they're told to do by leadership, because leadership, Democrat Party leadership in particular, will come out and say, here's a bunch of the bills. We need people to sign off on all these because this is the ones that the WEA or SEIU or the tribes or somebody all came and told us these are the ones we have to have. Gang Green, the homeless industrial complex, all these different groups. So they'll come up and they'll hand them to you, and sometimes they just assign them. They'll break them out into a certain number, distribute it around them. Everybody has the bills they need to sign off on. People have passion projects where they'll have a bill that they really do care about. Maybe it's specific to their district. A lot of those are relatively minor things. They're little projects that might be going on out there, renaming a road or a building or some relatively less damage than what they usually do with a piece of legislation. And so that kind of stuff could be going on. But mostly what you're going to see is, in like an example like this, Lisa Wellman probably just had no idea that she had signed it. Now it got all the blowback. She's probably happy not to have a hearing and be mocked too much about it. Let's see. Let me go down to the next question. This is not a question, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. And it has to do with about Washington gun law. This is from Crash Bandit 9949. It says Washington gun law gets a lot of the stupid bills that I do not cover, that you do not cover, which is me. And that's right. I did see he did the bill to ban 3D printers in Washington, essentially. Some other dumb bills that Washington State has. The one thing that Washington gun law does is they also cover a ton of other legislation from other states and court cases that don't have anything specifically to do about Washington. But Bill Kirk has done a great job. I think that's a phenomenal channel. I advise everybody who cares about the Second Amendment in particular to make sure you subscribe to it. He does sometimes cover things like the Insurrection Act. Can the feds passed the Insurrection Act in Minnesota? I love some of those topics. I think he does a good job. The one person I will say that has done a phenomenal job in the last 7 days or so with the videos they put out has been Brandy Cruz. And so, again, I would recommend you looking at some of those videos. She's done a great job. The WEA fake fundraising thing, or it was where they put these little kids up. She did a great job in this video. Put these little kids up who said they didn't have enough money in their classroom for crayons or for tissue. And then they had these superintendents on the same thing came in and said, yes, we're running out of money. We need more. And the average pay for these superintendents was $400,000 each. And it was really good that she called it out on it. I remember when I was working at the Freedom Foundation, we'd wanted to do a story about that. And it was a little more complex. Try to dig into the work and what we were going to do. And I remember mentioning it kind of in a few different presentations that I did back then. But it was really good for me to see her come out and do it in the way that she presented that video, where it actually highlighted the pay, $481,000. And the guy is saying, we don't have enough money for scissors here. Obviously, the school districts, some of these school districts in particular, have done such an egregious job squandering, wasting the money that they get. And the WA, of course, is there to profit from everything. And so they want more cash so that they can take more money back into their political action committees. And so they're pushing fake narratives about not having enough money. Meanwhile, not a single person in the education system at OSPI or anywhere in these leadership positions seems to care one whit about the collapsing standards in the school, the collapsing control, discipline consequences are gone. Failure is perfectly acceptable, high-fiving mediocrity at best, and the continuing decline in the quality of education, almost proportionate to the amount of money that we put into it. But she did a really, really good job with that one. And I thought that was very worthwhile and worth calling out. And I think we need more people doing videos like that. I have to reset my chat because it looks like I am not keeping up. And now there's a bunch more. Let's see. Here's a question. Kiki Waters, how long do you think Democrats will lead in Washington state government, et cetera? Well, obviously, that just depends on how some of the elections go, which is sort of related to the election reform and some of the other investigations. So I think that's important. All those issues really have an impact on this whole process. A lot of people like to have excuses to fail, and politics is kind of in that similar category. One of the things you find is when you look at political consultants, especially on the Republican side of things, they have Stockholm syndrome, right? Failure is the only thing they've ever experienced. They don't know any better. Failure is all they really plan to do. When they run political campaigns for Republicans, they're really trying to look and see if they can put enough candidates into their pool this cycle to get enough money to pay for their mortgage next year, because campaign consulting kind of has this roller coaster sort of pace opportunity that it's a weird business. You got to find things to do in between election years, and on top of that, because there's not that many consultants out there, they have to spend most of their time undermining each other and trying to throw each other to the wolves so that they can be in first position, more likely to get the next big, well-paid Republican campaign. The last thing on their mind is trying to win, or even run a campaign to win, nor do they usually have experience with winning anyway. It doesn't count winning in a primary, but I mean, really counts winning in a general election when you're faced with a Democrat. And very few Republican consultants in Washington State get that experience generally. And so it creates a vacuum of skills and ability within the political process. And that's one of the things that we really have to kind of overcome, I think. And how you go about doing that is a longer conversation, and I don't think I have all the answers to it, but I think it is worth recognizing that we don't have a machine set up to get people elected. Now, the attitude that most people have is, well, the party should do that. But I have to tell you, the Democrat Party doesn't help get people elected either. If you look at what they do, they outsource almost all of it to these other entities. And so these nonprofits and all these groups around the Democrat Party, they coordinate with the Democrat Party, but they're mostly outside of it. And that's generally how they run successful campaigns. There's a little bit more to it than that. But on the Republican side, we don't have the grifting pool of using taxpayer dollars to basically fund our activists and our full-time campaign people, whereas the Democrats do have that. And so that's a distinct disadvantage from a structure standpoint. In fact, really the only thing that surprises me sometimes is how effective some Republicans do when they run really good campaigns in comparison to the Democrats, who have every advantage. And so overcoming that is probably one of the structural challenges that we have to face. You want to change what's going on and change the direction of Democrats, you're going to have to run really good campaigns. I watched the Republicans pick up 2 seats, 1 seat a year for a number of years when they had slipped into a severe deficit, and they came back to within 2 seats in the state house, and they had tied and had nominal control over the state Senate. And that was interesting to see that grow and change over time. And it slipped back since then. It slipped back in particular with the Act Blue scams that are going on. It slipped back with a bloated budget that's obviously, as we're seeing now, is simply being used to recycle back into the pockets of campaigns and entities that help run campaigns. And getting that stuff cleaned up is going to be a big part of this process. Fraud and cleaning up fraud in Washington State, once you understand the significance of it and just exactly how extensive it is and how widespread it is, I think it's going to be a big, important thing. Let's see. Here's a question here from Penn the Mighty. Jim McPhee, O1S, she rescinded it, didn't she? Oh, you're referring back to Wellman's bill. Yeah, she said she had rescinded it, but you can't really rescind a bill. Once you put it in and it's in the system, technically it stays there. Now, you can see if it doesn't go anywhere, like it doesn't go to a committee hearing, then you know it's dead. But you can't really rescind a bill. Like, you don't take it and make it disappear. It still exists as evidence of your stupidity and incompetence when you originally proposed it, and it'll stay out there forever. Here's a question from No Fly Zone. Could an initiative force the state to relax regulations on building a new refinery or build a parallel Olympic pipeline so we don't rely on one old pipeline that continues to fail? Wow. You could probably get an initiative to relax some of those regulations. I think they're relatively complex. To some extent, refineries, in particular refineries, but a little bit on the oil pipeline as well, or natural gas pipeline, kind of some of that stuff. The pipelines tend to happen more in the background. They aren't as obvious sometimes and they are a very efficient tool to move both natural gas and oil over long distances. You don't have train wrecks, you don't have car accidents. There's a lot of benefits. You occasionally could have a leaking pipe. and it is a fixed location that's a point of vulnerability for sabotage and failure, but it's also easier to maintain and stay focused in those areas. I have not heard anybody talking about another pipeline that's parallel to the Olympic pipeline. There have been conversations about refineries, but that would be pretty amazing. I would not see that happening in the next couple of years, but if you did have a different leadership, I could see people deciding, hey, maybe we should look at expanding Cherry Tree Point or doing something that gives us a little bit more capacity to create energy locally. But that's a good question. I don't know if an initiative would be the optimal way to get there, but that's an interesting idea. Jack Palder, 1522. At We the Governed, you tried, but you put spaces in there, and that's why it didn't pop up. Odds on the I-5 bridge rusting away before a new one is ever planned. You know, here's the thing. We've got plenty of plans for new bridges in Washington State. I'm assuming you're talking about the I-5 bridge over the Columbia River. It was once a Columbia River crossing project, and that essentially collapsed under its own corruption schemes and just bloat and waste that was built into that terrible design. And really, it's been this obsession with light rail that has particularly come from the Oregon side, where Oregon has a failing light rail system that financially is very expensive, underwater, costs them a lot of money, a lot of debt. And what they need to do is try to see if they can just push that light rail over the bridge into Washington so they can shift some of the costs burden disproportionately to Washington State residents. That's a big part of the bridge design challenge. And some of it has to do with the height of the bridge over the river and the impact that was going to have in maritime shipping, and whether that, where they had to start the bridge to get to the optimal height. And light rail had some restrictions of just how curved the tracks could be. All this other stuff that's going on to make it so that, and all these special interests always pile in. Now, for the second time in a major federal project, we've made it so expensive, so questionable as to whether it's even possible to financially get it through without all the grifting and kickback schemes and probably fraud mixed in it that's going on in this one project. And if the fraudsters ever thought they'd get caught, and if they stopped deciding to jump onto each one of these as a great opportunity to make a ton of money, we could get a design through. I mean, the design isn't particularly difficult. It's the politics of it that's so absurd. The truth is, probably when you really look at the cross-border traffic between Washington and Oregon, it's not just replacing I-5, but they really probably need another bridge beyond that. I've seen a variety of these studies over the years, and it's just for historic reasons, Washington State's done, and Oregon have been involved in trying to turn these into like a necessary need that you have to replace a 100-year-old bridge. And instead of just get it done, everybody has to jump on the bandwagon every time as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to steal and to extract cash from a wasteful and bloated process. And, it's just going to take some adults in the room to come in and cut the fat out, cut the design out, dump this light rail idea completely just to get and make it big. If you're bothering to go through the hassle of building a big bridge that's going to cross a big river that handles a massive volume of river traffic from upstream, and therefore you need it to be a certain height so that you can accommodate that river traffic. Make it wide. Like, don't restrict yourself. Their designs have always been just terrible. I mean, double the size of the bridge that you need and just build it so when you're done, you're done. And then obviously there's another bottleneck you'd run into on the Oregon side for sure, probably on the Washington side a little bit too. But then at least your bridge is big enough, and then you can kind of build from there, and the bridge isn't your bottleneck like it is today. Let's see. Joffrey Coretti, at We the Governed, it didn't pop up because you put the period in. Please explain how the homeless industrial complex works. Thanks. Sure, no problem. So the homeless industrial complex is essentially you decide that you want to grift a bunch of money out of government. So you said, I know what I'll do. I'll help the homeless drug addicts that are downtown. and I'll come up with some cool virtue signaling kind of sounding name, get some street cred, work the corners a little bit, get some pictures, handing out flyers or food or something to homeless drug addicts, make it look like I'm doing something out there. And then you go in and you pitch the city council or the county commission or wherever it is that you've decided that it's your shortest path to cash. And you say that we've got a terrible homeless crowd. Of course, it's always homeless, not drug addiction. It's not alcoholism. It's not mental health. Always ignore those issues. Instead, focus on the fact that it's homeless. You got to help the homeless. They're just in dire straits. It's not hard to find photos, a bunch of passed out drug addicts somewhere or a bunch of garbage somewhere that you're going to help manage. And it's pretty easy. Get some of your friends to protest, hold up signs, we need more money, whatever it is. And then you get your grant for a warming center, for whatever it is that you've claimed you're going to do. Don't worry, nobody will audit, nobody will look, nobody's going to really compare notes. And you get your first bit of cash in, and if you don't have enough drug addicts in town, you got to import more, as they've done in the past years in Washington State, where they hand out flyers and invite drug addicts from California and all over the country to come to Washington. And that way you can say, oh my God, we took $5 million in last year, and I'll tell you, we're doing great work, but the homeless count, it's just exploding, and beyond our wildest dreams. Now we need 10 million, and then you get 10 million in, again, unaccountable. Maybe you spend 5% of it directly on helping the homeless in some significant way, but mostly it's about perpetuating their ability to maintain that homeless drug addict lifestyle on the streets. And so handing out drug paraphernalia, handing out stuff that lets them keep the cash they steal or bag, so they can spend on drugs. So give them free pallets, free tarps, free tents, free food, free clothes, free medical service, free Wi-Fi, free phones, free propane. Everything's free, and usually donated. So you get it, you hand all that stuff out and keep them alive long enough that you can make sure the drug cartels get their more pound of flesh and the cash, because they don't take credit, although they might take stolen product or other favors that are handed out in different ways, especially through human trafficking. And you're just part of the grift now. You're just one of, you got your little slice of the pie. Sometimes you're going to have to fight the other grifters who are maybe new people moving in, trying to cut off your supply of homeless drug addicts. Sometimes you'll work in partnership with them where you double or triple count the number of homeless drug addicts so that each of you can claim this huge number, and therefore you need more. And always virtue signal. Make sure you have a decent social media presentation where you pretend to be doing something. And somehow the more money that gets put in, the worse the problem gets. And you make bank, and nobody's auditing, so nobody can tell where the money goes. And you can retire a pretty rich person within just a few years if you know how to work it right. And that's the homeless industrial complex. The thing is, it's not just confined to blue states. Go out to Missoula, go out to Bozeman, go out to Boise, go out to Laramie. You will see the nascent sort of growing, building homeless industrial complex operations already started there. Those of us who have been paying attention to this, we recognize what it looks like when it starts. You go to those cities, you're going to see it starting. It's unfortunate, and it becomes really the decline, not just of the urban center, but I think it becomes the decline of the state or the community once you've kind of opened the door and you decide, okay, we're going to put this homeless camp or this warming center or this hotel that we bought cheap or whatever it is that you kind of have as your anchor project. And then after that, the grift begins. You're on the hamster wheel. Got to keep those drug addicts coming in, replacing the ones that overdose and die, replacing the ones that get arrested and put in prison, which is very few in the state. And certainly whatever you do, make sure they don't get off drugs and they don't get off the street. Or if you really work the grift in a fairly significant way, you can get a really large building and shove all the drug addicts inside so that the worst behavior is no longer out on the street, but it happens behind closed doors, which isn't particularly good. So anyway, that's the homeless industrial complex. I hope I explained that in an adequate enough way that you'd understand what's going on out there. The next question is Army Wife, Seattle, 1776. I'm looking at participation trophies for the upcoming protester rioters here as ICE moves through. I don't know how many to order. Any idea? Yes, if you want participation trophies for those who are going to go out there and virtue signal their coolness through their TikTok posts and selfies that they have downtown, pretending to try to stop ICE and for sure make sure ICE doesn't arrest sex offenders and violent criminals off the street, then I would say you better get a couple thousand. I can't see how it'd be much less than that. You got at least that many students and faculty at Evergreen State College, and they travel around, to go to a lot of these. You're going to have plenty from the UW. Really, a lot of them are paid, so they're paid by various groups, whether that's Fuse Washington or One America or whatever version of the No Kings entity or whatever entity. I mean, they change these names all the time, but essentially, whether it's Tides Foundation money or Ford Foundation cash or Arabella Group or whatever it is, all that money has to feed through, and sometimes they give stipends or enough effort to convince people who are otherwise not terribly employed, or they're employed for government so nobody's paying attention, and send them out there so they could break windows and assault people. And that's kind of how it's going. So a couple thousand trophies would probably be good for you to put in the order there. Let's see. There's this is good. I'm going to read this one. It's not a question, but I like the comment. Penn the Mighty. There's a video by How Money Works that explains how the homeless industrial complex works. The central funding hub in Seattle is the KCRHA. King County Regional Housing Authority is what you're referencing there. When you see how it works, it's not a surprise. Nothing gets done. Absolutely. I mean, they don't have any goal. The goal is absolutely not to fix the problem. It's just like Fish and Wildlife. The goal with State Fish and Wildlife, the honest employees that are out there, they'll eventually admit to you that the goal is not to save the salmon. The goal is to make sure, they don't want the salmon to thrive. If the salmon's thriving, they potentially lose their power and control over their budget that justifies why you give them billions of dollars over the years to supposedly help the salmon. They don't care about whether the salmon survives. They want some salmon to be out there. They don't want it to go extinct because then they could lose all their money. So they want to have just a couple salmon out there, and they don't care what really happens to it otherwise. I saw somebody on a fishing channel recently. Was it badger fishing? Something like that. You should go look at that YouTube channel. It's a small one, but he was documenting State Fish and Wildlife just basically digging trenches and dumping what looks like thousands of dead salmon that they decided just to kill and pull out. I don't know why they didn't have enough people fishing them or whatever it is, and bury them. Totally letting it go to waste, and they don't care. They don't care at all. As long as they have a couple salmon that justifies their budget and bloating their budget and hiring more people, that's what they care about. They don't really want to save the salmon. They don't want to save the species. They don't want to help end homelessness. They don't want to fix any of the problems that they're getting money for, because if they fix it, then their jobs could be put at risk. It's one of the same problems that we have with DSHS and some of these other state entities that provide services for government funding programs. I almost feel like I should jump into that, but I will keep going so I don't miss any other questions here. Let's see. Why are we getting a split screen advertisement? Oh, here, Jack Palder 1522. Why are we getting a split screen advertisement that cuts your voice out while it plays? Weird. I've never seen this before. Well, I've never seen it either, so I'll have to go back and look. I don't know what you're talking about. Hopefully you're the only one seeing that. Let's see. Actual Justice Warrior. This is another, I like this comment by Stephen Lim. Actual Justice Warrior just put a video out on the millionaire's tax. He broke it down in great detail on the hypocrisy of the bills and past taxes. Good job. Anybody that does a good job putting out topics like this. In fact, one of the videos I'm going to record tonight, I think, is I'm going to point people to different sources for what I think is really good information about what's going on right now in Olympia or Washington State in general, just so that you have it kind of in your inbox or in your short list so you know where to go. I've got some corruption stories that I've been wanting to put out, and with my schedule lately, I just wasn't able to put it together well enough to probably do the video on them right now. When I get done with Roanoke, I think I'm going to come out with a whole series of these. breaking it down and letting you decide whether it's fraud, corruption, or just grifting, and whether you think it should be legal or whether you think it's okay for those funds to be squandered and wasted in the way that they're exposed to be wasted. So I want to do a series of those kind of smaller, focused little projects that you can look right at and better understand how your tax dollars are squandered and wasted at every chance and every corner and every opportunity they get their hands on. So, but I think tonight I'm going to do a video on, or probably launch it tomorrow, but a video on just these other people that are doing some really good work. And I think it's worth knowing who they are and paying attention to who they are and following good people that expose the truth about what's going on in Washington. I'm always going to direct you there in every opportunity that I have, because it's not about me and building some kind of empire here. It's about trying to do the right thing and expose the truth in the state. Jason Fisher, 1530. Question. Good evening, Glenn. What are your thoughts on the Pierce County Sheriff testimony? Was it a trap for him, and will they use this law to remove him and the rest of the sheriffs? Yeah, I did see the sheriff's deputy, or sorry, the sheriff's testimony in the legislature. I'm familiar with that bill. It is a bad bill. It's kind of ridiculous because essentially what they're wanting, one of the things that the Democrats have hated is the fact that sheriffs are independently elected. And so they don't like that. They don't like the people to have much of a say in their own governance. And so anything they can do, one of the reasons why they like regional governance and very complex ranked choice voting, all these other little things to make elections complicated and even more difficult. Complexity is designed to discourage and hide transparency. And so by throwing all these different rules and things into the mix and making it so here's our way we can get rid of the sheriffs we don't like, and we can prevent them from being elected in the first place if we're worried about them getting in there. And all the sheriffs generally agree that they want to be accountable to the people. And with the Pierce County Sheriff, one of the things that you have to step back, Keith Swank, he's been getting just attacked repeatedly in his job position. And one of the challenges that I think people have sometimes, and you always have to be aware of it, is that you may be getting attacked and they may be doing all kinds of nasty, dishonest things to you. I think I did a video on one of the things where they put Randy Gaylord in as his attorney, like the pure definition of complete incompetent, evil, and poison. And that's the person that your prosecutor assigns to be supposedly your attorney in the litigation that you have that they want you to lose. And so they're going to give you the worst attorney they can find in Washington State, one who's thoroughly corrupt and sold his soul long ago, and put him in as the attorney for you to use. And I don't blame the sheriff for not wanting to use that guy as an attorney. And there's a lot of problems that he's been experiencing there. I don't know that the testimony that he gave, that's how I would give that testimony. And I think part of it is the hardest thing is sometimes you want to connect with the legislators, but one of the things to remember is that if you're trying to convince the other side not to do something, when you talk about how much it's hurting you or it's damaging the community and all this, they don't really care about that. They actually see that as a feature, not a bug. And so when you speak about those kind of issues in that way, you're more incentivizing them to think, oh, this is great, we can get rid of you, or I can chase you out of the state. This is good. It's one of the things that I think sometimes people forget about the psychology. When you have corrupt, dishonest people in there, they don't mind that they're harming you or chasing you away. They like that because they know that if you're testifying against something that they want to do, in order for them to continue their empire building, they'd prefer that you go away. They really want sheep or corruption, people that are benefiting from the corruption to be left. They don't want people who are standing up against them. And so they'll do anything they can to chase people like that out of the state. And so when you get up and you talk about how you're being hurt by it, it's like throwing fertilizer on the weeds. That's going to encourage them to do more of it. And but I'm not totally sure how likely that bill has legs. It's completely opposed by every Republican. So you got a real big block in the legislature that's totally opposed to it, and enough Democrats who probably are wishy-squishy on that one that I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. But it did make for good YouTube content, and that's just how it is. So let me pop out my. Just so you know, I'm occasionally losing my my questions as we go down here, so I have to go back and do it again. There we are. Oh, this is okay. Here's a good point. Dave Warren, 8937. The Olympic pipeline has more than just one pipe running south. Yeah, good point. And you're right about that. And I should have mentioned that earlier. I was really more looking at that question that he had as to whether you could do that via initiative. And I probably got off too much on my topic rather than staying focused on what the question was. But that's a good point to say that. Janet Wolf 9312. Why are there no charges being filed? All the laws that are being broken, for all the laws being broken. If it was common people, we would have the book thrown at us. Well, that's because there's two sets of rules. There's the law that you and I would have to live under, which would be abused at every chance the Democrats get to abuse you. And it'll never be interpreted the same way. Judges will never look at it the same way. The prosecutor will treat you differently. And then there's the way the rules would be applied to Democrat political insiders or allies of the Democrat Party or special interest groups that are involved there, and they get a totally different interpretation and treatment in the law. I mean, it's obvious. If you don't believe that, it's because you aren't paying attention. That's exactly how it goes. And I don't know that they get that much difference on a traffic ticket, for example, or something relatively minor. It's possible that you don't see a huge discrepancy on some basic low-level civil cases, maybe. But when it comes to anything that's remotely involved with politics, there are two sets of laws in the state. And probably most of the people watching this channel or who support me, you're in the cadre that's going to be treated much differently than the political establishment, and that's why there's two different sets of rules. I mean, it really doesn't come down to anything more than that. Let's see. Sorry, going down. Clenny or Clareny Veiled 8385. Is it true that $9 million was spent on security and a new fence at the governor's mansion? Someone told me that there's a fence that rivals Pennsylvania Avenue and only Class 3 BP glass. I think there was a security upgrade. I'll walk by the governor's mansion lately. The one side used to have a relatively small fence, honestly, on the one side of it. So, and you got to know the ego of the people that are in there right now. That would make them feel pretty important. I realize Ferguson's not staying in the mansion. He's living in Seattle, and he commutes by airplane mostly down here. But I could see him putting up a much more secure fence there. As far as like wasting and squandering money, that's probably one of the least concerning wastes of money that Olympia's had. There's a lot of other things they do that are a lot worse than that. Let's see. And a follow-up to that, I think you're saying I would think that with $9 million tax or $9 million in tax dollars, there could have been better thought and put into an effective security system. Well, if you actually think that, you just haven't been paying attention to state government. Intelligent and effective use of your money is really not their priority, or frankly, not really what they think about most of the time. So it's more amazing when they actually do something that's not a disaster. That's what's an impressive thing, I think, at times. Glenn, you need to tag into and play videos of other YouTubers like as Osmond Gold. It will change your algorithm. You should have 1 million followers. They are restricting your site. Yeah, they have been. They've been shadow banning the site for a long time. I don't know about 1 million followers, but it would be nice to have a few 100,000. I think that'd be practical. Some of what you think works wouldn't have actually worked when they were doing some of the shadow banning algorithms. None of the typical tools that you would approach that you would use back then would work. I do think they've kind of lifted it over the last year. And yes, I think I've been incompetent when it comes to getting my channel promoted or launched there better. And that is one of the things I'd like to get some assistance to work on. I think it could be a lot better than it is now. And I've mentioned to many people about building a new studio, which I have not completed yet, but I am in the process of trying to get it going. And I hope that will make it a little bit better by the end of the year here. Night Club P2J. Sorry, I don't know. I'm saying that wrong. Night Buho P2J. At least 3,700 people have died of drug overdose in Washington State in 2024. Very little police investigation due to lack of law enforcement. And that's true. I had a cousin that was one of those people in 2024. And it's very sad. Trust me, I totally understand the nature of just the complete disaster of drug epidemic of drug lifestyle and facilitating it, and the danger that it has for the people who die, like my cousin, who I've known since I was a kid. And it's really sad when we see that kind of stuff going on. So there is a lot of people that have died in the state. And unfortunately, Democrats have no desire to change that at all. I do believe there's been a slight downturn in some of the crime in Washington State. It does help if you deport violent, illegal criminals, any criminals. But if you can deport them and get them out of the country, that's good, even better. Get them in prison and off the streets is also good. I am a firm believer in the James Q. Wilson study of crime and punishment, which is pretty common sense, which is that bad guys, when you put them in prison, they at least aren't able to commit crime while they're there. Whether they get rehabilitated or not is not the point. The point is pull them off the streets so at least they aren't maiming and ruining the lives of thousands of other people. They only get caught for a fraction of the crimes they commit, and put them in prison certainly reduces the more crimes that they would have out there. The fish was past prime. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of curious about that. No matter what, the way I think Fish and Wildlife has dealt with that one is interesting. Wasting resources kind of goes hand in hand at that agency. Semi-country living, 3095. Is it true that the Dems are going to pass a 10-cent bottle tax? I don't know. I haven't heard of that one, but that one's been proposed a few times in the past. Gosh, going back at least a decade, maybe a decade and a half or so. So it wouldn't surprise me if somebody dusted that one off and threw it out there. It's probably not a big enough priority that's going to get through the system. I got a feeling that this legislative session is going to come down to a couple of marquee bills and a lot of chaos, and I'm not sure for absolute certain what's going to come through it. Let's see. Let's keep going down there. I'm seeing the split screen audio muting also. Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what you're talking about, so I don't know any setting that I have any more control over that one. Is it the Mafia too in Thurston County? I think what you're asking, and this is from Knight Buho, P2J. Yeah, we do have organized crime, obviously, in Thurston County, as do most counties. Probably mostly what you're going to see here is drug cartel organized crime. And so, obviously, as kind of a backbone of just distributing drugs, but it's also going to be about doing other things, that are related to the drug process. And you're going to see some other we don't really have the mafia out here the way that they do in the East Coast. We have it a little bit. I know the Curcio family up in the King County area. The other guy, the old man, died in federal prison, but maybe they're running some strip clubs and nightclubs and probably involved in other criminal activities as well. But the big ones I really think out here are more the big cartels, and it's not just the Sinaloa drug cartel. It's the CJ. There's another one that's fighting them, and those two might be see where it might be going past that. Sorry, I'm going to try to get down here. Any progress towards cleanup of the voter rolls? That's a question from Don Russell, 2017. We're still in eventually the same position that we were in about a month or two ago. From the time they filed it, there is some motion practice back and forth in the federal court system, and so until either one of these other states rolls up to the federal to the Supreme Court with a decision, or until we're a little bit further down a few months, I don't anticipate seeing a huge change over it. Jason Fisher, 1530, question: what crazy bills have caught your eye so far, and will there be enough time to pass all this, or is it just budget this year? Listen, most of these bills aren't going anywhere. They are virtue signaling, posturing bills that even if they had the votes, they want the... So for a legislator, you kind of get a street cred a little bit just by proposing a bill, whether or not it goes anywhere. And if you're particularly sophisticated, you keep proposing that bill for 2, 4, 6, 8 years, and you get the street cred all along for the effort you put into it, and you almost get just as much as you do if you pass it. In fact, you probably get more, because if there's a lobbying entity that's behind that bill, they're going to keep funding you to keep that bill out there. But you don't really, if you get it passed, now they no longer have the incentive to keep funding you and supporting you. And so it's this funny, weird world where a lot of these bills are ego bills, the wrong thing, but they're kind of just virtue signaling is the best term I can think of for it. But it's also kind of a practical bill that allows you to talk about something without the hassle and consequences of finally getting across the finish line. So you get a lot of benefit as a legislator. So whether you pass the bill or not is less important than proposing it. And I do think that that's kind of one of the things to remember about how that works. So I don't know. Anyway, but there are crazy bills. Obviously, the ones that originally had caught my eye, and I did some videos about this, was Lisa Wellman's effort to try to conceal the fraud at the daycare center. The last thing we want to do is have people spot fraud. But like I said earlier in this live stream, that one's probably dead. There's the bill the Secretary of State asked Senator Riccelli and Senator Valdez, I believe, to propose that would make it impossible for local auditors to provide voter roll information to citizens like me who, because I did those videos last year that exposed, based on information that Franklin County had uncovered, all the people in the voter rolls that don't have any ID or anything else referencing them in the voter rolls. That's the last thing they want to do, is for anybody to know the truth. So the Secretary of State wants to have the ability to control and restrict and prevent local auditors from providing information, which is, an indication of corruption. Those two caught my eye. The 3D printer bill is another just a oddball attack on Second Amendment, kind of, but free speech in general, that's typical. Obviously, the income tax is one that I think is a disaster and one that we want to defeat, because nobody's dumb enough to actually believe that it's a millionaire's tax. That's the sales pitch they give. But, I mean, you have to be genuinely somebody who not only is a product of public education, but you also went to Evergreen State College to actually be stupid enough to believe what they've said. Nobody believes that. They're going to, if they can get it across the finish line, they know they have a corrupt Supreme Court. So the theory is they're going to navigate it through the Supreme Court, get the Supreme Court to say that despite what the Constitution says, that they're going to get that approved, and then they can, it's a millionaire tax a day, it's $50,000 or more tomorrow, eventually it's every dime you make, they want their cut. That's how it exists. One of the very few benefits that Washington State still has is we don't have an income tax at all. So if they remove that as a benefit, then I think the exodus out of Washington, particularly productive businesses and people, would be very high, and the budget would collapse in a way that even Democrats might be able to figure that out once they get to that point. So we'll see how that can go. I'm going to go down to... let's see, Semi-Country Living 3095. I heard that when they clean up the voter rolls, Oregon will turn red, Washington will remain blue. Nobody really knows when they clean up the voter rolls. Listen, you clean up and you remove, whatever number, it's going to change things. And it changes things not like, it changes things in ledge districts. It changes things in races where you have 2% separation. It really has a big impact in those areas, first of all. Once those things change, then suddenly it changes the type of legislation you have in Olympia. It changes the types of bills you have. It changes your tax rate. It changes some of the craziness, too. And so, and that can create a trend. And where that goes, I don't know. We'll have to see where it goes. But I do think it's actually a bigger impact than people realize. Let's see. I'm going to try one more review and see if I've missed anything from that later pop out. Let's see. Go down here. Here's a question. Daniel's Circus Adventure 998. SB 6108, HB 2447, State Shark Bill. Do we need an official state shark? Well, put yourself in the shoes of the legislators in Olympia. to a hammer, everything's a nail. To a legislator, everything's a bill. They do want to pass some bills. They can pretend like they went and did something. And so naming state sharks or state birds or whatever it is that they state rock, state toy, state board game, state whatever. That's non-controversial, right? They don't have to argue about budgeting or money or anything like that. It's a feel-good. It's like vanity plate approvals. The state of Washington, it gives them something to vote on and pass through. When you look at like the bills that get done in a given legislative session, like 80% of them kind of fall into this category or more sometimes, where it's just bills that don't have direct impact and nobody really cares about, but it makes them feel like they achieved something. Don Russell, 2017, the Climate Act will be shutting down refineries in Washington state, just like what is happening in California. And I think what you meant is will with a question mark at the end. At this point in time, I haven't seen indications that that's going to happen, but California is a much bigger state than Washington. And the interesting thing is that because California went down this road in the most extreme way possible first, the impact in California is going to ripple up to Washington as far as what we actually choose to do up here. And I would guess that not because we have smart people, they're not going to learn anything, but my guess is that it'll be so extreme that the feds have to intervene in California, which simply stops the stuff from happening up here, and we'll see where we go from there. Let's see. Jason Fisher, 1530. Why do you think the Oregon governor now supports repealing the gas tax, which she just signed 2 months ago? Will she flip-flop again and then blame Trump? Yes, that's probably what she would do. Kotek's just, we do have really bad Democrat governors in this country, some of the worst humans you could ever possibly put into that position. And I would pretty much game plan out the stupidest sequence of bad decisions that somebody could make if they were thoroughly and comprehensively corrupt. You'll very rarely find an outcome that's different than that map when you watch how Democrats do this stuff in government. Now, every now and then they have to retreat. Either because of attention, money, backstabbing, undermining each other, and every now and then Republicans do something effective. So I would anticipate that you're going to kind of see this kind of thing again. There is a challenge with both Oregon and Washington in that people there are able to see the price of the gas. Our taxes are high in both states, and there's not a lot of benefit for them. It just happens to be something that affects everybody. And remember, if you're trying to sell cost of living, high gas taxes are one of those things that don't work well. And all right, guys, I'm just going to keep going down this a little bit. There's a number. Okay. I got a question here. Let me jump in on this. Smoky Bow Peep. Are they going to change our state flag like Minnesota did? I don't know. They might try to put it as a red flag with hammer and sickle on it. We'll have to see. I don't really know that that's very likely, but we'll see what happens there. Jason Fisher, 1530. Question, what are your thoughts on the Seattle and New York City mayor? Both stopping homeless sweeps, and what alternatives do they offer? Should they be moved into their front yards and use their bathrooms? Well, yeah, what you're really doing is a regression, both Seattle and New York. Of course, they're going to do this together. You have, exceptionally unqualified people running both cities. And of course, they're going to sign on to whatever the special interest. The homeless industrial world needs more money. The drug cartels need more clients. They need to be able to distribute it better. They need a crazier environment on the streets to make it easier for criminality and high crime to flourish. So having more homeless camps is probably good. So why do the sweeps? That's kind of their attitude. I don't know how long that'll last. It didn't work too well last time. If I was a Democrat Party, I probably wouldn't view that as a positive overall. But I guess they'll just give us a lot more to film and document in the city pretty soon. Let's see. I know there's some people logging on for the national championship, so I appreciate that. And it is. We are coming up to that time anyway. So let me just close a little bit with just a quick point. to mention to everybody that I really appreciate you logging in. I'm sorry about the technical problem I had earlier where I accidentally launched a fake live stream, and I got to remember to have my mic muted when I'm screwing around trying to sort out some of my technical problems ahead of time. So I apologize for that. But hope all is well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Pay attention to what's going on in the legislature. If you're going to one of my DOGE training classes, please make a point of coming up to me and letting me know what you're uncovering, what you're discovering, and what you find. The point of them isn't to keep those discoveries secret, but to make them as public as possible so that we can hopefully hold a little bit more accountability in places where our political leadership would prefer that we don't look. There's a lot to uncover here, and our state is no exception. It takes a lot of people to go in and be involved. Legislative session, we got 60 days here. Sign in on every bill you can and tell them why you think it's a bad idea. And the more people who do that, the better. Believe it or not, it really does help. The more that information gets out there, it puts pressure on our bad elected officials. Eventually, they run out of time and energy, and they decide that they may not want to go with that full level of corruption that they had originally planned on. So I really do think that it helps if we get more people out there doing that. Thank you guys again so much for watching. And just remember, as I always say in all my videos, the future belongs to those who show up. So please show up out there. Get more people to show up. We've got our hands full and great stories to expose soon. And help us share those far and wide. Thank you so much. And we will see you next week. And I think I'm going to be back on a regular Tuesday live stream next week. Talk to you later.